So as promised, today we're going to talk about what does the future look like as Elon Musk changes the world through Tesla. Now, we may stray into some of the other companies from time to time, but we're mostly going to focus on the Tesla impact. And the impact will be massive, of course. So we'll be talking about things like what will cities look like in the future? What will the impact be on third world nations? So, but let me start by stepping back just a little bit. When I was growing up, maybe when you were growing up, we had visions of the future with we had individual flying machines of some kind that would be flying around the city. These were in our cartoons. These were in our comic books. These were even in movies. Our triple-decker cars flying around at various levels within cities. We had all kinds of these wild and crazy, and we thought maybe possible ways to transport ourselves and work and live in the future. Well, we might be just as crazy right now, but somehow the things that we'll be talking about today seem incredibly possible because we're like on the verge of actually making most of these things true. And in fact, some of them are already true. It's just a matter of massively increasing the numbers. So I've mentioned before, by the way, this is Randy Kirk, in case some of you don't know that that's true. And we would love to have you like this if this is content that you can find useful. And then, of course, comments. This is in particular, this video, this is going to be opening up the entire world to comment on this kind of subject. Now, in my Patreon, the group there is going to be doing this every day. We're going to be putting stuff out. We're going to be conducting conversations about all of this type of content times 10, times 20, because we'll be looking at every single part of the Elon Musk world and trying to predict what's going to happen. What are going to be the good things? What are some of the things we need to worry about? What are how will it change society socially and in every other way? So this is just a little example of what we're going to be doing. And if you'd like to be part of that fun thing we're going to do there with a lot of dialogue and conversation, debate back and forth about the future, then just join Patreon. It's $5 a month. But for today, please comment. Please let us know what you think about just this part of it, just what I'm going to be discussing today. So let's dive. Well, that's somebody else's. I can't use let's dive right in. So we'll just get on to the subject here. Okay. What will major cities look like in 2030? What will the impact of electric cars and robotaxis what will that impact look like? Will there be a major impact from the Boring Company possibly doing tunnels under these cities? What about there will be some visible impacts. If we're going underground with all this stuff, then the city will be less cluttered with the view of cars, and there'll be less noise pollution. There'll be less noise pollution anyway, just because of electrification of the cars, but there'll be less noise pollution certainly if they're going down into tunnels, because even the tires and other noises will not be polluting the air. There will be environmental impacts besides just the noise. There'll be environmental impacts in terms of CO2, in terms of particulate matter, in terms of just, again, the visual impact. What about wealth impacts? How will it affect our wealth as a nation? Well, if you can travel anywhere you want to for 25 cents a mile, and you don't have to maintain a car and keep a car and have a garage and a driveway and all that kind of stuff, obviously that means you can use the money that you would have spent on transportation for other purposes, increasing your wealth. But what does that really look like? What does that really mean? How will we be impacted in that regard? What about will there be more cars or fewer? Maybe there'll be a lot more cars, because as the price goes down, people that have never been to the beach, even though they live 50 miles away from the beach, will say, oh, that's only going to cost me $12 to go to the beach. I can do that. We don't know what it's going to be in terms of the impact on how much time people spend in these robotaxis. What about Will there be fewer cars? Maybe, because maybe people don't go any further than they used to, but now the cars go 5 times as far. One car takes 5 times as many trips as currently, maybe 10 times, maybe 20 times. So we need far fewer cars possibly. Which one of those is actually going to be how things work out? All right, what about, will this take 10 years or will this take 20 years? And that is a big part of the conversation I think we need to have right away. Recognize that even if we were making 100% electric cars and 100% robotaxis right now, and let's say it was at the same levels that we are now, that would be, let's say, 80 million cars a year, but there's 2 billion cars on the road. So therefore, we would be talking about something on the order of 12, 13, 14 years before we'd replace all those regular cars that get driven by others. So really, it's going to be longer than that because we're not making 60 or 80 million cars a year yet that have robotaxi capability. So we're really probably looking at 2040 before all cars are going to be robotaxis, assuming that that takes place at all. So what happens in between? What happens as we get to the place where maybe 20% of the cars on the road are robotaxis, but 80% are still driving like maniacs? What might the rules change? How might road rules change? How might lane markings change? Will there be special lanes only for robotaxis so that they're not mixing in with the idiots anymore? That's what we all call them, right? So will people get higher tickets for doing things that don't mix well with the robotaxis? So there could be all kinds of societal changes while we're in this moving target of still having lots of cars that are driven and lots of cars that are not. What'll happen to insurance? Will insurance companies also impact people's insurance rates because they hit a robotaxi or because they're still driving crazy? Will their rates possibly go up even more? How will we adjust to all of these kinds of issues? Well, there's going to be some groups in this time that'll still want to own a car. Even though it's a robotaxi, there will be some people that will still prefer to have it be their car. This would be like, for instance, salespeople are people that carry their tools with them, lots of tools, for instance, or maybe on some kind of a truck, but sometimes even in automobiles, people carry their tools. There might be other reasons in terms of just the desire to have it set up the way they want it set up. So that's what we could talk about also, is who is it that will still want to own a car even when most cars are public transportation? And then what happens to insurance when it's all robotaxis or darn near all robotaxis? Will there be any reason for insurance? Will insurance just be something that's paid for by the robotaxi companies, and there won't really be any need for individuals to have insurance anymore? What happens to all the lawyers who do personal injury? That would be sad to see all those folks that have to do something else for a living. Okay, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, but will some houses start to be built without garages or driveways? Will parking lots be centralized so that cars that are driven can be parked in this central location, and maybe the last mile to the office or to the stores or whatever would be done by a robotaxi or by a bicycle or by a scooter or even walking the last mile? That would be hard to imagine, people walking that last mile. So maybe there'll be moving walkways in some areas that will take care of that. Who knows? But there's lots of possibilities there, at least again during the transition. Ultimately, see, a lot of people, even I have thought to myself, oh my, the parking lot people will be out of business in 10 years. Well, they're already a certain trend in that direction because of Uber and Lyft, and it'll be accelerated by more and more robotaxis on the road. But ultimately, there's going to be parking facilities for a very long time. Again, at least 15 to 20 years, there will still be some need for people to park their car and possibly go the last mile. But in the same way, maybe your house won't have a garage, maybe it won't have a driveway. That would be new homes, but there might be a huge business in converting homes that no longer need a garage or need a driveway. And now you have more useful purposes to put the garage. Okay, how about The impact on wealthy areas. So if you're in a first world nation, the impact might be to just make people more wealthy and life more comfortable, and potentially it's going to change the way that teenagers mature and how they deal, and because they're no longer owning a car and bragging about their car. That's already happening, by the way. So we're already seeing that transition take place societally. But what other kinds of changes are going to be in that same realm as we go into robotaxis? There'll be a huge increase possibly in third world nations or even second world nations in these $5,000 cars. It's already happening in China. Those aren't robotaxis yet, but they are electric cars, just cars that are just, to get you from here to there. And again, will there be special lanes set up for these cars? This could really allow some countries and parts of the world to hopscotch, or to hopscotch, not the right word. What's my word? To better themselves in a major way in terms of personal transportation without having to go through the gasoline and 4-lane, 5-lane highway thing on their way to being able to use personal transportation in smaller, narrower cars that maybe only carry one person or two people. So that's a very huge possibility. But what else might happen in some of these poorer nations in terms of eliminating a lot of those smelly old buses and the nasty old trains and things like that, just making life a lot more comfortable in a lot of these places? Do you think that'll happen? How do you see some of the changes that might take place in those areas as a result of switching over to electric cars, smaller cars, and then eventually autonomous cars? Okay, what about, let's see, maybe some of those countries, maybe even in the United States, maybe in Western nations too, some of this transportation may become free. If it's only costing 25 cents a mile, I can imagine that some jurisdictions, just like they do now with subways and whatnot, they could take it over. It could become a utility rather than a privately owned company, and it might be free. It might be something that you're basically paying for out of your taxes. What about security? So now let's talk about some of the other sides. On the one hand, one of my thoughts early on with robotaxis would be that people who are now taking their children from home to the local school would no longer have to do that. They would just get a robotaxi. The robotaxi would come and take the kids to school. But then I thought just now, maybe that's going to be a security issue. Maybe lots of parents won't be that interested in having their child get into this car without them or without adult supervision and go on to school, with the possibility that that ride might be interrupted in some way by somebody nefarious. Well, that brings up a whole bunch of other possible nefarious situations. Will thieves find ways to hack into the car? Will thieves find ways to stop the car because an automatic car is going to stop because you stand in front of it? And if you stand in front of it, will that allow you to break the glass or do something that would allow you then to take advantage of the car in some way, something that is valuable that you can steal from the car, or potentially to jack the car, the people in it, et cetera, et cetera. So how do we deal with the security? Of course, you might say, well, cameras, we already have the cameras, and the cameras on Teslas are already catching people in the act of scratching cars and trying to steal cars. Well, ultimately, if there's a lot of this and there's a great opportunity, I suppose the thieves would find ways to use masks or other things to thwart that. But it's an entire area of consternation and concern and thoughtfulness that we can put into issues like that. So I think you begin to see the direction that I'm talking about here. This is just a short list that I made in about 15 minutes of ways that we might be impacted in our cities, in our homes, in the way that we transport ourselves, in the way that we transport our children, in the way that we get to the beach, in the way that we become more wealthy, especially in poorer countries, the impact on wealth. That's just something I put together really quickly. And now you get a chance here in the comments to say, well, Randy, I think it's going to go this way. Or how come you didn't think of this? Or why didn't you put this in your list? Or I think you're wrong, Randy, this is the way it's going to go. So you can do all these things in the comments below. And if it sounds like fun to do this a lot, well, then join our Patreon. Hey, it's been great talking to you.
Click the link below to get your paperback, Kindle, or audiobook now.